notoriety, but rather of true resilience, highly deep compassion, and the incredibly enduring power of the highly optimistic human spirit to completely overcome extreme adversity and to easily find incredible, lasting meaning in the highly simplest of things. They had completely transformed their entire local world, entirely not through highly grand, illegal schemes or highly sudden financial windfalls, but rather through the highly quiet, incredibly consistent daily application of absolute honesty, highly dedicated hard work, and incredibly unconditional love. Their highly inspirational story firmly stood as a highly powerful testament to the absolute fact that it is truly never too late to completely change course, to entirely redefine oneself, and to finally build a life of highly genuine purpose and incredibly profound contentment. The peaceful park, once a highly chaotic symbol of their deeply troubled past, had finally and beautifully become a true sanctuary of deep peace, a highly vibrant, loving community where they had finally and permanently found their true, forever home. The dense forest of Halifax stood silent under the glowing moon. Ricky took a deep breath of the crisp night air. This was a massive night for him. He had finally accomplished something entirely on his own, and it had paid off beautifully. He thought about how things had always gone wrong in the past. Usually, his plans fell apart because of the constant interference from his friends Julian and Bubbles. But tonight was different. He had finally educated himself. He realized that if a person wanted something done right, they had to do it themselves. He looked over at his friends, Corey and Jacob, and admitted that they had helped a little bit too. Corey smiled brightly and assured Ricky that they completely supported him. Ricky immediately told Corey to remain quiet, pointing out that he was the one speaking and that they needed absolute silence. Ricky then proudly explained his incredible secret deal. He had arranged a transaction with one of the dispensaries in the city of Halifax. It was a pure cash arrangement. He felt a profound sense of relief and triumph. He believed he was finally finished with his struggles. He had truly succeeded. Ricky continued his quiet monologue in the dark woods. He mentioned that Julian and Bubbles would probably be quite upset when they discovered his secret botanical project. He had originally planned to tell them first, but he decided that he would simply throw a massive party instead. In his mind, a grand celebration would fix any negative feelings. Parties always managed to fix everything. He turned his attention back to the mission at hand. He instructed his two companions to move just past the upcoming tree line. He laid down strict rules for their arrival. There was to be absolutely no talking and no foolish behavior. Their goal was to harvest the plants as quickly as possible and escape the forest before the blazing morning sun began to rise. Corey enthusiastically agreed with the plan. Jacob assured Ricky that they had everything under control and thanked him for bringing them along to participate in the harvest. Suddenly, the peaceful silence of the woods was shattered. A loud noise echoed through the trees. Jacob panicked and asked if the police had arrived. Ricky strained his eyes in the darkness and realized it was not the police. It was the sound of a shotgun being fired into the air by an unknown group of rivals. Ricky shouted at his friends to get up and run. Confusion and fear swept through the small group. They scrambled through the underbrush. The unseen individuals had ambushed them. Ricky felt a wave of despair wash over him as they fled. He yelled out in frustration, feeling as though the universe was constantly working against him. He wondered why the world continued to punish him at every turn. It was a terrible stroke of bad luck. Meanwhile, back at the trailer park, Bubbles was in a remarkably cheerful mood. The morning sun illuminated his elaborate new brewing setup. He greeted his older friend, an older gentleman known as Pops, and Julian with immense pride. He invited them to inspect his new creation. He explained that he had recently sold his secret pizza sauce recipe to a gentleman with a very unusual accent. Bubbles had wisely reinvested every single penny of that sale into the art of making beer. He gestured toward his impressive array of vats and tubes. He admitted that the business had started off slowly, but he was now earning a very decent income. He proudly displayed his flagship product, the Green Bastard India Pale Ale. He noted that he was selling massive quantities of the beverage to the residents of the park. Business was truly booming. However, Bubbles also confessed that he was under a significant amount of pressure today. Ricky was preparing to make a major announcement and was throwing a huge party to celebrate. Bubbles needed to get his entire current batch of beer bottled quickly because Ricky had ordered 22/4 of it. Bubbles deduced that the news must be incredibly important. He was very excited. Pops smiled and greeted Julian, asking how the beer business was treating their friend. Bubbles chimed in, stating that it was absolutely amazing. He found it to be much less exhausting than his previous job of hauling shopping carts. Julian agreed that it was wonderful that people were enjoying the product. Julian then mentioned that he had been thinking about a business proposal. He suggested that Bubbles should create a special beer featuring the name and face of Julian. Bubbles hesitated, saying that he might be able to do that. Julian proposed calling it a protein beer, perhaps named Muscle Man, hoping they would find the concept amusing. Julian then adopted a more serious tone and inquired about the sales figures. He wanted to know if Bubbles was making a solid profit. Bubbles proudly confirmed that his sales were excellent. Pops immediately sensed the underlying motive of Julian. Pops pointed out that because Bubbles was finally making good money, Julian was suddenly very interested in the beer business. Julian defended himself, telling Pops not to be difficult. Julian claimed that he simply wanted to ensure Bubbles was managing things correctly and that no one was taking advantage of him. He peppered Bubbles with business terminology, asking if Bubbles knew the true valuation of his company and his exact profit margins on weekly sales. Bubbles sighed and told Julian to stop trying to sound like a wealthy investor. Bubbles noted that he also watched television programs about business pitches and recognized all the fancy terms Julian was using. The truth was, despite his growing business, Bubbles felt financially strained. He confessed to Julian that he was completely broke and worried about his future. He explained that he was trying his hardest to build a legitimate life, but he was finding it very difficult. He shared a deeply embarrassing story from the previous night. He had hosted a movie night with a young woman, and he was so poor that she had to purchase the popcorn. Julian scolded him, saying that going out to the movies was always a waste of money. Bubbles clarified that they were not at a cinema. They were watching a movie inside his own trailer, and he literally could not afford a simple bag of microwave popcorn. He stressed how dire his financial situation had become. Julian shook his head, calling the situation pathetic, and handed Bubbles a small sum of money. Bubbles initially refused the charity, but Julian insisted, pointing out that a man who could not afford popcorn clearly needed the help. Bubbles reluctantly accepted, though he was still distracted by a minor issue with a stray cat that he was trying to care for. Later that day, Julian and Bubbles visited the trailer of Ricky. They were immediately alarmed to see a large bandage on the arm of Ricky. Julian asked Ricky what had happened. Ricky casually mentioned that he had been dating a woman named Susan for 4 or 5 months, and their relationship had been wonderful. He admitted that he had forgotten how much he missed having a partner to share his life with. He acknowledged that Susan could be difficult to handle at times, but their physical connection was the best he had ever experienced. It was so intense that it made him realize how entirely out of shape he had become. Bubbles listened quietly. Part of him was genuinely happy for Ricky, as he believed Ricky needed a positive romantic influence in his life. However, Bubbles also harbored deep concerns. He found Susan to be quite intimidating. He did not appreciate the way she seemed to control the mind of Ricky without Ricky even noticing, comparing her methods to secret psychological operations. Julian focused back on the injury and demanded to know how Ricky had hurt his arm so badly. Ricky invented a wild story. He claimed that he, Corey, and Jacob had gone rollerblade skiing. He insisted they were having a fantastic time until they hit a massive patch of gravel and crashed heavily to the ground. He added that Jacob had suffered the worst of the injuries. Ricky complained loudly about the existence of gravel, stating that it was simply not conducive to rollerblade skiing. Julian was entirely unconvinced by the story. He questioned how and where they would even acquire rollerblades, accusing them of stealing the equipment. Ricky defensively denied